Little did I know that that wasn't going to be true. So in 2004, 4 years after my initial arrest and incarceration, the Ontario Provincial Police, the state police, began an investigation of their own into the Durham Regional Police. And at that time, I was pulled from my cell, put on a bus with a dirty pair of jeans on and a T-shirt, and dropped off at the Canadian-American border with no ID, nothing at all. Now, I had lived in Canada for 11 years, people. When I got back to America, there was no record that I had ever been in Canada. No driver's license record, no marriage license record, no bank accounts, credit cards, nothing. Scott Loper was never in Canada according to the Canadian government. I faxed Gary a document where Congressman Robert Andrews of New Jersey, who was the first person to request a congressional investigation into this, wrote to Condoleezza Rice requesting that she look into this. The chief of Western Hemispheric Division of the State Department, a gentleman named Keith Davison at the time, wrote back and said, there is no record of this incident. There was no record of my incarceration, no record of anything. And so the investigation, and everything ended. I mean, what are you going to do? Canada says I was never there. I'm saying I was there. The State Department subsequently said, if you can provide proof, we'll look into it again. I provided that proof in 2007 with some documents that I had smuggled out of prison on the last day when they drugged me out. Congressman and House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer presented those documents to the State Department. This presented a problem for the State Department because they knew the truth, and they know the truth. But they contacted the Canadian government, and the State Department wrote back in documents again, and number 3, that your family will be notified. Those 3 things are done because courtesy. It protects everyone's citizens, everyone. Now, you may or may not be aware of a gentleman named Jose Medellin. Jose Medellin is a illegal Mexican murderer of 2 young girls in Texas back in the mid-'90s. Recently, President Bush sent the Solicitor General to the Hague, Netherlands, to the World Court to defend Jose Medellin because the United States had not notified Mexico of his arrest. The Mexican government was upset about that, and the president agreed. Hey, you know, we violated the Vienna Convention. It's important. The president said, and I quote, a perceived failure to comply with Article 36 of the Vienna Convention would do irreparable harm to the United States moral leadership in the world. And he further stated that if we don't honor these treaties, we can't expect other countries to honor those treaties, and that puts Americans abroad at risk. How right he is. He also should have said, except where it interferes with my political agenda.
Hey, Scott, can I cut you off there and explain a little bit of the law here?
Yes.
All right. This is Scott Shields. You know, I first heard about this case, and, you know, I even told Scott, you know, I'm skeptical about it, you know, what's really going on. Scott came to me through Congressman Rob Andrews, who's now running against Senator Frank Lautenberger in New Jersey in the Senate primary for the Democratic seat that's open. We wrote to Rob Andrews. Rob Andrews, as Scott identified, wrote to the State Department. They said that there was no record. If you have any other information, give it to us. Well, we gave them everything, and they just sort of blew us off. We let things percolate. We kept pushing the issue. Finally, when we learned that the Canadian government did have information about this all sort of percolated then again to the top, and it was through Congressman Steny Hoyer that we found out that Canada really did know about what happened. And one of the interesting things and one of the more treacherous things about what I believe our government's done in this is that Steny Hoyer was to meet with us in early April. We went down to his office to have a personal meeting with him. And this is the second most powerful man in Congress.
We went to Washington, yes.
Yeah, we went down to his office, and he didn't show up. In fact, I was sitting in his office, and I heard a buzzer, and I asked, what's that buzzer? Oh, there's a roll call vote. Well, there were no roll call votes that day. But I said, does that mean the congressman isn't going to be here? And they said, well, he's probably going to be here because he really cares about, this case. So we went into a conference room. We sat down. The congressman wasn't there. We sat down with his, I don't even know what you would call her. His
supervisor.
Yeah, for constituent services.
Right.
And she essentially said that we had a document that we got from the Canadian government where Mr. Loper waived his consular rights. And what that was they were saying that Scott waived his notification rights under the Vienna Convention, Article 36. And I immediately asked, do you have that document and what's the date? And they said, the date is June 3rd, 2003. And I took a breath, and I said, well, gee, that's like 3 years after he was incarcerated. That's not prompt. That's nothing. Like, what's going on here? Do you have this document? We don't have the document. The State Department has it. Was it signed? And Betsy, the woman we spoke with, said, oh, no, it's not signed. It was unsigned. I was like, well, is anybody, looking at this and wondering, what really is going on here? If somebody's going to waive their consular rights, which you really can't do as an individual under the Vienna Convention on Consular Affairs, anybody look at this? And, anybody have any questions about this? No, sorry, we really can't do anything about it. Well, Scott was upset about it. I was upset, but I was more pissed than I was upset. And I started asking, do you have this letter? So she gave me a copy of the letter that they received from the State Department, and it says June 3rd, 2003, this notification or this waiver of notification was signed, or it was presented, but it was unsigned. So I kept the copy of the letter, expecting that I was probably going to get mugged when I walked out of his office building, and they were going to seize the letter, but they didn't. But then the next day, I get a phone call from a guy named David Oberholzer, and don't ask me to spell his name, but he was from the State Department Diplomatic Security Service, which is law enforcement for the State Department. And they knew about what was going on because they got a report immediately back from Steny Hoyer's staff saying that Mr. Loper was very upset. So they told me that Mr. Loper, after we left the meeting, went over to the State Department and was writing his name in spray paint on newspaper boxes. And I said, what do you guys what do you mean he went over to the State Department? He was with me. No, he was there because Loper was on this newspaper box, and Ken Dirksen is very nervous, and he's worried. And so I asked him, I was like, you guys have to have video, you have to have pictures, something. Like, what's going on? He said, well, look, I want your client to lay off. He just needs to lay off, or I'm going to go to the U.S. attorney. And I said, well, pal, you know what? We're not laying off. If you think you have enough to go to the U.S. attorney, go do it. I said, because we'll take you on, too. I said, this is a bunch of crap. And we never heard back from him. But that conversation with this diplomatic security service individual was confirmed through WorldNet Daily because they called him. And he said, yes, I spoke to the lawyer, but I'm not going to discuss this case with you. And then it all sort of gelled that, you know what, these guys know exactly what happened. But God forbid anybody takes a shot at the Canadian government, because these days, if you take a shot at the U.S. government, our government just bends over and says, hey, what do you want? We'll give you money. We'll just do anything to make it go away because we're big, bad, we're evil. But when it comes to going after the Canadian government or the Mexican government, whether it's Medellin or Campion and Ramos, there are a number of cases out there, we just don't do anything. So to go to the second most powerful man in Congress to ask for his assistance, and he's Scott Loper's congressman then in Maryland, and to get blown off, you really got to wonder. So we started digging a little bit deeper, and it started raising issues about this whole North American Union. It started raising issues about, like, we looked at Medellin, we looked at the Campion Ramos case, and like these things are all intertwined.